Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I call the sixth meeting to order. We will now proceed with agenda item 5A, general debate. And I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Validity Foundation.
Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, friends and colleagues, my name is Stephen Allen and I represent the Validity Foundation. We are a specialized non-governmental organization that promotes the implementation of the CRPD through deploying legal strategies. To us, rights need to be enforceable, and it is Validity's mission to make sure that persons with disabilities can exercise convention rights within national proceedings. Today, on the third day or the last day of this Conference of States Parties, I would be remiss if I did not honor the memories of two leading figures of our global disability rights movement, Sir Robert Martin and Dr. Bhargavi Davar, two of the leading lights of our movement who we have lost in recent weeks. Each of them embodied the spirit of the convention and were leaders respectively of persons with intellectual disabilities worldwide and persons with psychosocial disabilities worldwide. They embodied through their work and their example that more inclusive and fair societies are possible, including through working at the grassroots level, but also through using the CRPD as a legal tool to effect real change, enhancing equality, inclusion, and justice for persons with disabilities worldwide. Validity is just one of only a very small number of organizations in the world dedicated to conducting strategic litigation. And so at this Conference of States Parties, we are calling on all states parties to support independent legal advocacy for organizations of persons with disabilities in order that convention rights can be made real. Indeed, in every one of our cases, we represent persons who have suffered the most indescribable violations of their rights to legal capacity, to inclusion in the community, and to their right to inclusive education. It is essential that legal advocacy in these movements are supported, and we call on all states parties to the convention to join us in ensuring accountability for victims of human rights violations, as well as taking forward real measures to implement the convention and breathing life into convention rights within our courts. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Validity Foundation, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Mr. President and distinguished guests, I would first like to express my appreciation to the Bureau and the Secretariat for making this session possible. Japan continues to attach great importance to human security, which seeks to protect and empower individuals, including persons with disabilities. In this sense, Japan believes it's crucial to address the challenges faced by persons with disabilities. Mr. President, the Japanese government continues to work hard to achieve an inclusive society where persons with and without disabilities can coexist. For instance, last March, Japan revised a basic policy for the Act for Eliminating Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, based on discussions held by the Commission on Policy for Persons with Disabilities, of which a majority of members are persons with disabilities. This basic policy states that the government promotes consultation of a National Consultation Office that will serve to explain laws and regulations and link persons with disabilities and businesses to appropriate consultation offices. Thus, last October, Japan established a one-stop consultation office tentatively in the Cabinet Office besides the consultation services of national and local governments. Furthermore, this April, the amended Act for Eliminating Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities entered into force. It fully obliges all businesses to provide reasonable accommodation for requests from persons with disabilities, which was previously an effort-based obligation to the extent it's not excessively burdensome. Besides, Japan nominated Mr. Tamon, a lawyer with over 25 years of practical experience, as a candidate for the CRPD. I'd like to take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation for all the valuable support extended to him and reaffirm Japan's commitment to the further implementation of the Convention, including towards an inclusive society. Mr. President, Japan also emphasizes the perspectives of the persons with disabilities in the context of achieving the SDGs. Japan co-sponsored a pre-launch event of the UN Disability and Development Report organized by DESA this Monday and is contributing to production of the executive summary of the report in an easy-to-read, accessible format to be prepared hereafter. The report is one of the few references that comprehensively addresses the SDGs from a disability perspective, providing current status and the progress of each goal and target, and noting concrete measures to accelerate the realization of the SDGs by, for, and with persons with disabilities. Japan adheres to the key principle of the SDGs, leaving no one.
I thank the representative of Japan for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Russian Federation.
Господин председатель, Российская Федерация ратифицировала Конвенцию о правах инвалидов 12 лет назад. Сейчас можно констатировать, что это стало отправной точкой для большой работы по приведению национального законодательства в сфере социальной защиты инвалидов в соответствии с Конвенцией. Теперь требования по обеспечению инвалидам условий фактического равенства возможностей для самореализации и порядка их обеспечения определены во всех сферах жизнедеятельности. Системные законодательные требования по созданию безбарьерной среды для инвалидов определены на федеральном, региональном и муниципальном уровнях. Эти требования поэтапно реализуются в таких сферах, как образование, здравоохранение, занятость, культура, транспорт, градостроительная политика, информатизация и спорт. Знаковым событием конца прошлого года стало принятие закона о комплексной реабилитации и абилитации инвалидов. Этому предшествовало принятие концепции развития системы комплексной реабилитации и абилитации инвалидов, в том числе детей-инвалидов, и плана по ее реализации. Закон принят с основной целью обеспечения возможности предоставления гражданам с инвалидностью необходимых реабилитационных мероприятий и услуг по всем направлениям реабилитации. Благодаря этому решению законодательство в области реабилитации инвалидов приобрело комплексный межведомственный характер. Впервые на законодательном уровне определено содержание основных направлений комплексной реабилитации, а также их регулирование. Это значит, что во всех регионах страны будут обеспечены единые гарантии комплексной реабилитации. Очень важно отметить, что в законодательство введен порядок разработки и реализации стандартов предоставления услуг по отдельным основным направлениям комплексной реабилитации и абилитации инвалидов. Эти нововведения вступят в силу с 1 марта следующего года. Законом о реабилитации также вводится понятие «ранняя помощь детям и их семьям», определяются условия их предоставления. Внесены изменения в закон о социальной защите инвалидов, вводящие положение о сопровождаемом проживании инвалидов. С прошлого года в полной мере заработали новые правила признания лица инвалидов. Так, 80% решений о проведении медико-социальной экспертизы было принято в заочном формате. В целях максимального учета функциональных особенностей, предоставляемых инвалидам технических средств реабилитации, принята новая редакция перечня показаний и противопоказаний для обеспечения инвалидов техническими средствами реабилитации. Перечень обеспечивает возможность указания технических и функциональных характеристик ТСР при их назначении специалистами учреждения медико-социальной экспертизы. Это позволяет обеспечить адресный подбор необходимого изделия, в том числе исходя из индивидуальных функциональных особенностей человека. Внедрено проактивное информирование граждан, которые впервые сталкиваются с инвалидностью.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nepal.
Thank you. Mr. Chairs, people with disabilities face multiple difficulties and barriers: social, attitudinal, physical, economic, psychological, communication, and others. They face various forms of health inequities. It is stunning to learn that some persons with disabilities die up to 20 years earlier than those without disabilities. They face difficulties in accessible and affordable transportation 50 times more than those of the persons without disabilities. Realizing the rights and meeting the needs of the persons with disabilities is therefore critical to leave no one behind. This will be possible only when we ensure that persons with disabilities live with dignity and honor, and when we commit to ensuring that they participate in and equally benefit from sustainable development efforts. Mr. Chair, the Constitution of Nepal has ensured the right of every person to live with dignity, the right to equality, and the right to social justice as fundamental rights. Participation of persons with disabilities in Parliament is guaranteed by the Constitution. We have ensured their participation in the civil services through reservation quota. Those measures are fundamental in ensuring their rights to political participation and participation in policy making. Nepal has ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The government has taken transformative measures through different laws, policies, and schemes to ensure a dignified life for persons with disabilities and ensure meaningful participation in social activities. Nepal has also adopted the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act to ensure their civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as non-discriminations in workplaces and employment opportunities. The government continues to provide social security allowance to enhance their community and cultural life, social security and movement, among others. Mr. Chairs, despite these different measures, persons with disabilities continue to face numerous difficulties and challenges. In the paucity of disability-friendly physical infrastructures in remote areas, they are unable to access education, health, and employment. Nepal is committed to working together to ensure that these people live in dignity by ensuring their full and equal participation in policy making as well as social, cultural, and economic spheres. Let us commit to ensure
I thank the representative of Nepal, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Republic of Moldova.
Mr. President, I will be delivering the short version of my speech. Mr. President, rethinking disability inclusion in the current international juncture and ahead of the Summit of the Future is a matter of utmost importance. The Republic of Moldova supports the Summit of the Future in its aim to accelerate efforts to meet our existing international commitments and take concrete steps to respond to emerging challenges and opportunities, and in this process to pay a particular attention of the strengthening of the human rights pillar, and inclusion in this regard is of great importance. The government of the Republic of Moldova and other national authorities promote the inclusion of people with disabilities in all fields. Following its commitment, international commitment, several advances have been registered in terms of social protection and inclusion of people with disabilities, including the reanimation of the National Council for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the signature of a memorandum of understanding with international organizations for the purpose of financial and material support for people with disabilities. The government decision for the approval of metrics and the indicators regarding persons with disabilities was finalized, and the social allowances and indexation of disturbing pensions was increased by 14%, and the compensation for transport services for people with locomotor disabilities by 33%. At the same time, different types of social services were developed for the people with disabilities. They enjoy all the rights established in the Labor Code of the Republic of Moldova. Measures regarding the protection and safety of people, including persons with disabilities in the situation of risk and humanitarian emergency, are also established and granted, regardless of citizenship, as for example for displaced persons from Ukraine. Mr. President, to ensure the full inclusion of people with disabilities, further tangible efforts and actions are to be undertaken at the national and international level, including those taking into account consideration the processes discussed here. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the strong commitment of my country for the implementation of the Convention, including for further development, best practices, and to cooperate with other states for the benefit of all people, so that no one is left behind. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Moldova, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Myanmar.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, I wish to congratulate you and the members of the Bureau on your election. This year's session is another significant avenue to allow the international community to review, explore, and plan for the promotion and protections of rights of persons with disability, particularly under the overwhelming theme and sub-themes of the conference designed to discover means to address the challenges faced by the person with disability. Myanmar welcomes this year's session's focus on disability inclusion, alongside the ideas shaping discussions around international cooperation to promote technology innovations and transfer for an inclusive future, risk situations, humanitarian emergency, decent work, and sustainable livelihoods. In fact, all these areas strongly resonate to the situation in my country, Myanmar. Since the illegal military coup in February 2021, promotion and protection of the rights of persons with disability have been curtailed, and the violations against their rights were further exacerbated. The military junta's atrocities and indiscriminate attacks against the people across the country have made many people disabled. The tragic incidents we face are man-made and by the abusive military junta. So far, sufficient necessary assistance has not reached to these vulnerable groups. Moreover, Myanmar has been left far behind in the areas of advanced technologies support and further innovations, inclusion of persons with disability in every society, ensuring education, creating employment, and laying down frameworks for sustainable livelihood due to the unlawful military coup. Despite various challenges and constraints, the National Unity Government, together with ethnic resistance organizations, has spared no efforts to provide assistance to persons with disability, including those who recently became disabled due to their junta's atrocities. It includes, among others, providing prosthetic appliances to victims of landmines. The NUG and EROs have also been working together to remove explosive landmines planted by the junta to prevent civilian casualties. In this regard, I thank their development partner for their support. Notwithstanding numerous suffering they face, the people, including persons with disability in Myanmar, are resilient and resolute to work together to end the military dictatorship and to build a federal democratic union. Therefore, we appeal to the international community to extend effective support to the people and to our efforts for saving lives and bring future back to the people of Myanmar, including persons with disability, as well as making sure the promotion and protection of the rights of persons with disability.
I thank the representative of Myanmar for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Queensland Advocacy for Inclusion.
Hello, my name is Uncle Paul Calcott, an Indigenous person with disability and community elder from Australia. Queensland Advocacy for Inclusion has partnered with Mob for Mob for this intervention. Mob for Mob is a peak body owned and operated by Indigenous people with disability in Queensland, a state in the north of Australia where the second largest population of Indigenous people live. Our aim is to promote the Convention of the Rights of People with Disability and the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. There are not enough accessible resources, so we have developed Reflections of the UN CRPD to empower Indigenous disabled people to know their rights. You can see prints of the artwork on your desk or come and see us after. Each artwork reflects a different article of the UN CRPD. We have digitised these resources and they can be seen in our online side event accessed by scanning the QR code on the postcard. In the digital version, the screen starts blank and each symbol appears with a narrative describing its meaning until the artwork is completed on the screen. You can see also an artwork here by Jaya Cornwall. Jaya is a young Indigenous man with Down syndrome. You can see at the top of the art is a football field and a symbol representing a person with a black belt to show his martial arts. This is connected to Article 8, awareness raising and celebrating achievements of people with disabilities. Jaya is non-verbal, but through art can tell his story. Making the art digital has spread his story around the world. He has a painting in the Australian Embassy in Geneva. Article 19 is about inclusion, represented by my artwork here. The over 50,000-year-old fossilised footprints from a place called Lake Mungo show an Indigenous Australian with one leg was participating equally in a hunt using a walking stick, a very important community event. This shows that we had a culture of inclusion before colonisation. Our aim is that one day all disabled people will again have the ability and have the right to participate in that hunt. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Queensland Advocacy for Inclusion, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. The United Kingdom has supported the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities since its inception, and we were proud members of its founding working group. The Convention serves as a key tool in ensuring persons with disabilities are full and equal members of society with human rights. Today, I will briefly set out how the UK seeks to advocate for persons with disabilities in our domestic and international work. Firstly, the UK government has undertaken work to address barriers faced by persons with disabilities. This includes initiatives to facilitate greater employment opportunities for persons with disabilities and comprehensive reforms to our health and disability benefit system. In February, the UK government published a Disability Action Plan, setting out practical actions aimed at improving the daily lives of persons with disabilities. Our recently published Resilience website offers guidance on how persons with disabilities and carers can best prepare for emergency situations. Second, the UK continues to champion disability rights and inclusion on the global stage. In collaboration with the International Disability Alliance, the UK initiated the Global Disability Summit movement in London in 2018, which led to nearly 1,000 commitments from across the international forum. Following another successful summit by Norway and Ghana in 2022, the next summit, hosted by Germany and Jordan in Berlin in April 2025, presents an important opportunity to sustain momentum. And finally, the UK is looking ahead to the upcoming Summit of the Future as a key opportunity to enhance global cooperation on critical challenges. The summit's Pact for the Future, which will set out the actions needed to tackle these challenges, must address the needs of persons with disabilities if we are to safeguard the future for all people and ensure no one is left behind. To tackle the global challenges of the 21st century, we cannot leave anyone on the sidelines. The UK continues to focus on promoting the full, active, and meaningful participation of those with disabilities across all our work. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of United Kingdom for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Croatia, His Excellency Ambassador Ivan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It is a privilege to share the progress Croatia has made recently in implementing the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. One of our notable achievements is the implementation of the Personal Assistance Act of 2023, which creates the Personal Assistance Service as a state-provided social service, ensuring its sustainability and financial continuity. Consequently, the number of people entitled to personal assistance has increased by 11,000, significantly enhancing their social inclusion and preventing institutionalization, as well as providing support for children with special needs during their education. Mr. Chair, the right to work is a fundamental right guaranteed by our Constitution. Recently, we allocated 135 million euros to promote the employment of persons with disabilities, resulting in approximately 3,000 individuals being employed annually. Our active labour market measures, tailored to the needs of the most disadvantaged, provide larger and longer subsidies for persons with disabilities, along with co-financing the education, training, workplace adaptation, and 75% of mandatory health insurance contributions for employees. Our commitment to enhancing the quality of life for persons with disabilities is also demonstrated by our early recognition and implementation of the EU initiative to introduce the European Disability Card and European Parking Card. Croatia is proud to be the first EU member state to implement this initiative, simplifying the process for persons with disabilities to exercise their mobility across Europe. Finally, Croatia remains steadfast in its dedication to promote, protect, and ensure that people with disabilities enjoy human rights and fundamental freedoms on an equal basis, although there is a long way to go. In partnership with civil society, we are committed to achieving these goals through dialogue, mutual trust, and understanding. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Ambassador Ivan for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mali.
Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de saluer votre leadership et de féliciter l'ensemble des membres du bureau, y compris le secrétariat, et avec une mention spéciale à notre chef Marois. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs, le Mali attache une importance particulière à la situation des personnes handicapées. C'est pourquoi, au plan international, il a pris part active à l'élaboration de la Convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées et son protocole facultatif qu'il a ratifié dès 2007. Au plan national, le gouvernement a adopté les textes subséquents. Des structures nationales, régionales et locales sont créées pour assurer la promotion et la protection des droits des personnes handicapées. Dans le domaine de la santé, le gouvernement a mis en place des régimes d'assurance couvrant les personnes handicapées, y compris pour le dépistage et les traitements adéquats. De plus, des équipes mobiles prennent en charge des personnes les plus âgées. Une ligne de crédit budgétaire spécialement dédiée à l'appareillage des personnes âgées. Sur le plan éducatif, des institutions d'éducation spéciale pour différentes catégories de personnes en situation de handicap visuel, intellectuel, physique, auditif sont en place. L'éducation y est gratuite et les équipements sont fournis par l'État. Des soins spéciaux y sont également assurés. Pour faciliter l'accès des handicapés aux infrastructures publiques, le gouvernement a adopté des normes d'accessibilité aux bâtiments et édifices publics. En matière de transport, des panneaux de signalisation ont été implantés sur les grands axes routiers. Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement a également pris des dispositions pour faciliter la communication et l'accès des personnes handicapées à l'information et à la communication. Plusieurs médias proposent des programmes dédiés aux personnes handicapées. Les sourds-muets bénéficient de la traduction de certaines diffusions et également de certains grands événements. L'État appuie la formation des traducteurs-interprètes. Monsieur le Président, soucieux du plein épanouissement des personnes handicapées, le gouvernement du Mali accorde des subventions et des exonérations fiscales aux organisations de défense de leurs intérêts. Il en est de même pour la réalisation d'activités génératives de revenus, d'activités socio-culturelles, de moyens de mobilité. L'accès de logement leur est également garanti. En matière d'emploi et de formation professionnelle, le gouvernement a adopté 2 politiques nationales qui prennent en compte leurs droits. Un quota leur est accordé au sein de la fonction publique. Les personnes handicapées participent activement à la vie publique, notamment pour l'exercice de leurs droits civiques et politiques. Cependant, des efforts demeurent à faire. Monsieur le Président, pour terminer, je voudrais remercier tous nos partenaires qui nous accompagnent afin de garantir les meilleures conditions de vie aux Maliennes et Maliens, et en particulier aux personnes handicapées. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of Mali for her statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mongolia, His Excellency Ambassador El Khbod.
Mr. Tarek Ladeb, President of the Conference, distinguished delegates, it's my great honor to address the 17th session of the Conference of State Parties to the United Nations Conference on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities has always been of great importance to Mongolia. Mongolia joined the convention in 2009 and adopted the law on the rights of persons with disabilities in 2016. The law aligns with the convention and upholds the fundamental principles of the human rights. Following the adoption of the law on rights of persons with disabilities, the National Council was established in 2016 to coordinate cross-sectoral activities and to ensure unified management of the disability rights. In 2018, the General Directorate for the Development of the People with Disabilities was established as a government's implementing agency. Mr. President, Mongolia welcomes this year's overarching theme of the Conference of State Parties, highlighting the importance of the rethinking disability inclusion in the current international context. The government of Mongolia has made special efforts to harmonize the national strategy with the convention and adopt an inclusive approach. Notably, to improve the national legal and policy framework, we have developed the first draft of law on barriers and accessibilities and a revised draft of the law on rights of persons with disabilities, which was submitted to the Parliament in May 2024. Mongolia also actively participated in the high-level intergovernmental meetings of the Economic Social Commission for the Asia-Pacific region in October 22. The meeting reviewed the implementation and achievements of the Incheon strategy and set a new strategic goals for the next decade through the Jakarta Declaration 2023 to 2032. Currently, Government of Mongolia is preparing to ratify this too. Currently, Government of Mongolia is preparing the declaration. Furthermore, Mongolia continues to work ambitiously on the implementation of the convention. Last August, Mongolia's second and third reports were discussed, and the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities provided 35 recommendations. We are currently developing the comprehensive plan to implement these recommendations, which will be a crucial instrument for our further work. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Ambassador El Khbod for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lao People's Democratic Republic.
Mr. President, on behalf of Lao delegation, I would like to state that Lao PDI has been firmly committed to protect and promote the rights of persons with disabilities. According to CRPD, the CRPD has been streamlined into our national legislation and the law on persons with disabilities, adopted in 2018. In addition, the national strategies and its action plan for 2030 have been developed, including the National Social Protection Strategies, which has become integrate part of the current, the ninth Socio-Economic Development Plan and the Agenda 2030, No One Left Behind. To ensure the policies are fully and effectively implemented, the government strengthened the coordination mechanism through the Committee for PWD and its focal points representing line ministries and OPD at different levels. Under the supervision of the committees, a nationwide advocacy campaigns has been conducted to disseminate legislation and provided necessary support and services for PWD, including health care, rehabilitation, vocational training, employment opportunities, and livelihood development at all levels. Moreover, PWD representatives have been strongly encouraged to policies, dialogue, and the database system has been established, and the data applied for better planning and better support operational purposes. To fulfill the obligation, the government has drafted the CRPD action plan for better report in 2027. Mr. President, the Lao PDI will continue its utmost efforts to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities in close collaboration with all stakeholders to ensure the full and effective implementation of the CRPD by mainstreaming into sectoral policy, health, education, public work, and other sectoral sectors. Learning from the own experience, some challenges encountered, including limited resources in both human and capital terms. We stand ready to work closely with all UN member states and international organizations to ensure fully and effective implementation of the CRPD. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Lao for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Foundation Cultural Boyer. Yes, sir, you have the floor.
Yes, Cambodia. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Tali and Abades as well. Good afternoon. Concerning we allow ourselves to deliver an effective, sustainable action and innovating solutions to increase the learning and interesting of the students relating to meaningful inclusions of young people, to transforming education in accordance with the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Education and training can help to make a difference. The percentage of the persons with disability who are employed increase with their level of education. As you know, the simulation of Model United Nations are popular exercise for those interested in learning more about United Nations. Hundreds of thousands of students worldwide participate every year in Model United Nations at all education levels, from primary school to university. The 30-20 agenda stipulates the need to ensure equal access to all levels of education and vocational training and access to lifelong learning opportunities, including for persons with disabilities. Let me share that the Fundación Cultural Board, organized with the framework of the Board International Model United Nations, held in March 2024 a committee named Toward to the Summit and the Pact for the Future, specifically with the Chapter 4, with the meaningful participation of students under the protocol, modalities, and scope and upcoming Summit of the Future. Consequently, we recommend evaluate the possibility of encouraging and disseminating the realization of the Committee of the Summit and the Pact for the Future in all the model of United Nations, where young people, including young persons with disabilities and migrants, contribute to promoting sustainable development, human rights, peace and security, to quality, inclusive education, and equal basis to other learners, providing relevant solutions for their sustainable well-being and livelihood from their perspective and needs. Educational is an essential element where the people with disability have acquired education, their life has improved. Having in mind, disability is not inability. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the representative of Fundación Cultural Boyer for his statement. And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Republic of Korea.
I am honored to represent the Republic of Korea at the 17th session of the Conference of State Parties to the CRPD. Since joining the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2008, the Republic of Korea has respected the fundamental principle of the Convention and has made steady endeavor to fully implement the CRPD. The Korean government has established a 5-year mid to long-term plan for the Comprehensive Plan for Persons with Disabilities for 2023 to 2027 in accordance with the Act on Welfare of Persons with Disabilities. The aim of this plan is to enhance the quality of life of persons with disabilities and ensure their rights protected across all areas of life. Specifically, the measures include the individual budget system for persons with disabilities, which allows persons with disabilities to choose with flexibilities which services they hope to receive according to their needs and preferences, and a pilot program of this system will be introduced soon. To establish a lifelong care support system for persons with developmental disabilities, pilot project for 24-hour care for persons with the most severe developmental disabilities are on the way. Along with the operation of developmental disability hub hospital and behavior development promotion centers, as well as emergency care centers for persons with developmental disabilities. Also, to establish a tailored healthcare support system for persons with disabilities, the Korean government plans to establish the comprehensive plan for healthcare management of persons with disabilities, expand persons with disabilities-friendly healthcare institutions, and improve the system of designated physicians for healthcare of persons with disabilities. The Act on the Prohibition of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, which mandates the provision of convenience for persons with disabilities in terms of using mobile apps and kiosks, is now in effect and being implemented to ensure digital accessibility for marginalized groups such as persons with disabilities and the elderly. Mr. President, the Korean government is striving to faithfully implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in all decision-making and implementation processes regarding policies for persons with disabilities. The Korean government prioritizes reflecting the experiences and voices of persons with disabilities. The Korean government will continue to actively communicate and collaborate with organizations, academia, as legislative body. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Republic of Korea for her statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Oman.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سعادة الرئيس، السيدات والسادة المحترمين، الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة نحن لهم ومن أجلهم. تولي سلطنة عمان بقيادة صاحب الجلالة السلطان هيثم بن طارق اهتماما بالغا بالأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، وتعمل على تمكينهم من حقوقهم التي كفلها النظام الأساسي للدولة وقانون رعاية وتأهيل الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة والاتفاقية الدولية للحقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة واستراتيجية العمل الاجتماعي. قامت سلطنة عمان مؤخرا بالعديد من الجهود، أهمها حيث تم الانتهاء مؤخرا من إعداد مشروع قانون جديد لحقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة يدمج إحكام اتفاقية حقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، مما سيسهم في تطبيق جميع أحكام الاتفاقية على الصعيد الوطني. كما قامت بالتعاون مع وزارة التنمية الاجتماعية بالتعاون مع وزارة الصحة ومنظمة اليونيسيف لإعادة تفعيل مشروع تقييم الإعاقة المبني على أداء الوظائف بعد توقفه بسبب جائحة كوفيد-19، كما تم تدريب عدد من المتدربين لتقييم وتحديد الإعاقة على مستوى سلطنة عمان. تسعى سلطنة عمان نحو تحقيق التنمية المستدامة وفق رؤية عمان 2040، حيث جاء الابتكار عاملا رئيسيا في جميع أهدافها، وأحرزت سلطنة عمان تقدما في مؤشر الابتكار العالمي لعام 2022، حيث حلت في المرتبة الأولى عالميا في مؤشر في مؤشر مخرجات العلوم والهندسة من إجمالي عدد الخريجين. كما أعدت وزارة التنمية الاجتماعية الدليل الوطني للمواصفات الهندسية للبيئة العمرانية الدامجة ووسائل النقل للأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة بمشاركة الجهات الحكومية والمجتمع المدني، مما يضمن حق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة في الوصول السهل إلى مختلف الخدمات. ومن أجل التغلب على التحديات الخاصة بقطاع الإعاقة تم تنفيذ مختبر تطوير خدمات وبرامج الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة في أواخر العام الماضي، حدد له هدفا رئيسا أشخاص ذوي إعاقة من الجنسين وفي جميع المراحل العمرية يتمتعون بالحقوق الصحية والتعليمية والتشغيلية ومشاركين بفاعلية في المجتمع. شارك في هذا المختبر ما يزيد من 1700 شخص من مختلف المؤسسات الحكومية والأهلية والخاصة والمنظمات الدولية، وخرج بعدد 33 مبادرة يتم تنفيذها على أرض الواقع حاليا. إننا نؤكد على أهمية التكنولوجيا في تمكين الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة وفي تقديم الخدمات لهم بكل سهولة ويسر. قبل فترة قصيرة تم تدشين منصة التأهيل الإلكترونية وذلك لتوظيف التقنية وتسهيل تطوير الخدمات للأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة. كما
I thank the representative of the Sultanate of Oman for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bahrain.
السيد الرئيس، تولي مملكة البحرين اهتماما بالغا بفئة ذوي الإعاقة إيمانا بمبدأ توفير فرص متكافئة لمختلف شرائح المجتمع وتوفير حياة كريمة للجميع، وتثمن الدور الذي يلعبه الأشخاص ذوي الهمم كمساهمين في المجتمع وفي دعم الجهود الرامية إلى تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. وقد أنشأت حكومة مملكة البحرين برامج ومبادرات مختلفة لضمان إدراج الأشخاص ذوي الهمم في جميع جوانب الحياة، حيث تشمل هذه المبادرات برامج تعليمية وفرص عمل، فضلاً عن تيسير الوصول إلى خدمات الرعاية الصحية وغير ذلك الكثير. وتقدم وزارة التنمية الاجتماعية حزمة من الخدمات المجانية والتي تشمل الوصول إلى خدمات العلاج الطبيعي والتأهيل المهني والتأهيل الأكاديمي والرعاية النهارية والرعاية الإيوائية والرعاية المؤقتة. كما أصدرت مملكة البحرين العديد من القوانين والقرارات الرسمية المعنية بالأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، والتي تضمن الالتزام بدعمهم وتمكينهم للعيش الكريم دون تمييز. وقد بادر العديد من مؤسسات القطاعين العام والخاص بإطلاق مبادرات وعقد شراكات مجتمعية مع ذوي الهمم. السيد الرئيس، تعمل مملكة البحرين حالياً على الخطة التنفيذية للاستراتيجية الوطنية لذوي الإعاقة للأعوام 2023 إلى 2027، والتي تمثل رؤية شاملة وإطار عمل متكامل لضمان حقوق الأشخاص ذوي الهمم ورعايتهم، وتمثل كذلك إعلاناً والتزاماً وطنياً للمساندة والدعم المقدم من الحكومة لتمكين هذه الفئة لإدماجهم في المجتمع البحريني. وعبر تنسيق الجهود بين كافة المؤسسات الحكومية والخاصة والأهلية، تطمح الاستراتيجية إلى إيجاد مجتمع بحريني قائم على مبدأ الدمج يتمكن فيه المواطنون ذوي الإعاقة من ممارسة كافة حقوقهم بشكل عادل ومتكافئ من خلال بناء القدرات وتمكين الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة وذويهم ومؤسساتهم وكل المهتمين بتقديم الخدمات لهم. وتتبع الاستراتيجية نهجاً قائماً على حقوق الإنسان يرتكز على المبادئ الواردة في ميثاق الأمم المتحدة والمواثيق الدولية والاتفاقات المتخصصة، ولا سيما الاتفاقية الدولية لحقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة. أما على الصعيد الرياضي فتأتي استضافة مملكة البحرين الجمعية العمومية العادية للجنة البارالمبية الدولية 2023 لتؤكد اهتمام المملكة بدعم فئة ذوي العزيمة وتعزيز ثقافة رياضة ذوي العزيمة ودمجهم في المجتمع. وختاماً السيد الرئيس، تجدد مملكة البحرين التأكيد على حرصها والتزامها بصون حقوق ذوي الإعاقة تنفيذاً للاتفاقية الدولية لحقوق هذه الفئة، فضلاً عن توفير الحماية الشاملة لهم عبر تعزيز ودعم حقوقهم في كافة المجالات المجتمعية والإنمائية. وشكراً السيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for her statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Togo.
Monsieur le Président, distingués délégués, je m'appelle Agbono Kordio Siva, directeur général de l'Action sociale. Le respect des droits des personnes handicapées fait partie intégrante de la politique de promotion des droits humains de la République togolaise. Pour garantir l'accès au système judiciaire et administratif, une assistance judiciaire accordée aux détenus vulnérables, y compris les personnes handicapées. Les magistrats, les forces de l'ordre et le personnel judiciaire sont formés et sensibilisés sur la Convention et le développement inclusif, le droit international humanitaire et la paix. Dans le cadre de la préparation en prévision des catastrophes, une centaine de tricycles a été acquise et distribuée aux personnes handicapées des milieux à risque sur toute l'étendue du territoire national en 2014. Dans le but de permettre aux personnes handicapées de jouir de leur liberté d'expression, d'opinion et d'accès à l'information, les journaux télévisés sur la télévision nationale sont interprétés en direct en langue des signes. S'agissant de l'éducation inclusive, un modèle de manuel national a été élaboré et validé en 2020 et consiste à prendre en charge les enfants en situation de handicap dans les mêmes classes que leurs camarades non handicapés. Pour permettre l'inclusion et l'autonomisation des personnes handicapées dans la société, le gouvernement togolais a inscrit le handicap dans ses actions prioritaires à travers la feuille de route gouvernementale Togo 2025 en son axe 1 intitulé « Renforcer l'inclusion et l'harmonie sociale et garantir la paix » et ainsi que dans l'axe 3 du Plan national de développement PND 2018-2022 qui stipule consolider le développement social et renforcer les mécanismes d'inclusion. Monsieur le Président, malgré les avancées relevées depuis l'adhésion du Togo à la Convention il y a 13 ans, des défis restent encore à relever. Il en est ainsi des difficultés à trouver une famille d'accueil pour les enfants handicapés. Pour ce faire, le gouvernement togolais accompagne les familles d'accueil avec un soutien représentant le double de celui accordé aux familles accueillant les enfants non handicapés. Il est difficile de mettre en œuvre efficacement certaines dispositions de la Convention, à l'instar du droit de vote des personnes handicapées, en raison des difficultés pour rendre tous les bureaux de vote accessibles aux personnes handicapées et le matériel de vote en format braille. Le gouvernement de la République togolaise s'efforce de maintenir un rythme constant et continuel des réformes pour une grande jouissance des droits des personnes handicapées, malgré les moyens restreints. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of Togo for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis Silue Katiama Mariam, je suis la directrice de la promotion des personnes handicapées de Côte d'Ivoire. La Côte d'Ivoire souscrit à la déclaration prononcée par le représentant du groupe africain. Elle voudrait y ajouter les observations suivantes à titre national. Monsieur le Président, les personnes handicapées ont de tout temps été l'objet de marginalisation, de mépris et même de négation de leur existence par leurs semblables. L'adoption de la Convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées a été un tournant décisif dans la longue marche de l'inclusion sociale des personnes vulnérables. En effet, plus de 18 années après son adoption, il se pose la question de l'harmonisation des politiques et stratégies avec la Convention afin d'éradiquer les formes multiples de discrimination dont les personnes handicapées sont victimes et continuent de vivre dans notre société très peu adaptée à leurs besoins de mobilité. D'où la pertinence de ces besoins annuels, de ces sessions annuelles. La mention explicite des personnes handicapées dans plusieurs cibles des objectifs de développement durable, notamment au titre de l'éducation de qualité, de travail décent et croissance économique, inégalités réduites et villes et communautés durables. C'est une invitation à davantage d'efforts pour leur inclusion effective dans tous les aspects de la vie sociale et répondre ainsi à la promesse des Nations Unies de ne laisser personne de côté. Monsieur le Président, répondant à ces injonctions de la Côte d'Ivoire a pris des mesures législatives et institutionnelles qui ont permis d'enregistrer des avancées notables dans le cadre de l'inclusion sociale des personnes handicapées. En effet, la loi fondamentale et plusieurs textes prévoient des avantages aux personnes en situation de handicap en leur garantissant non seulement leur accès aux services sociaux de base tels que la santé, le sport, les loisirs, la culture et l'éducation, mais aussi une insertion professionnelle réussie. Dans la même veine, notre pays s'est engagé dans un programme appelé Côte d'Ivoire solidaire, qui incite sur le renforcement de l'inclusion dans la solidarité nationale et de l'action sociale en faveur des personnes handicapées. Aussi, dans le souci permanent d'assurer une plus grande dignité à ces personnes si importantes pour le développement harmonieux de notre société, le gouvernement a entrepris plusieurs actions. Il s'agit de la fixation par le Code du travail d'un quota dans le cadre d'un programme d'aide à l'embauche.
I thank the representative of Côte d'Ivoire for her statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Vietnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vietnam welcomes the theme of our conference, Rethinking Disability Inclusion in the current international juncture and ahead of Summit of the Future. It underscores the urgency of mainstreaming rights and needs of the people with disabilities across all global policy and framework. Rethinking inclusion is vital to build greater resilience, accessibility, empowerment for disability community during pivotal global juncture. As we look ahead to the Summit of the Future, this call to action compels government and stakeholders to collaborate on inclusive policies. Such efforts uphold equality and rights while enhancing sustainable development by dismantling barriers to full participation. They foster a resilient society where unique contributions of persons with disability are valued. Mr. President, in Vietnam, nearly 7 million people, or 7% of the population, live with disabilities. Promoting and protecting their rights remain our national priority. We have established a robust legal framework aligned with CRPD, including Law on Persons with Disability in 2010. This provides a solid foundation for safeguarding their rights and well-being. And furthermore, Vietnam has implemented empowerment and integration policy program. The National Action Plan for Disability 2020-2030 prioritized non-discrimination, equal participation, and accessible services and opportunities. It aimed to boost inclusion in education, employment, healthcare, and social welfare while removing participation barriers. Significant strides have been made through vocational training, employment support, and social protective initiatives. There are 1,100 vocational facilities nationwide, including 225 specialized for persons with disability. Employment Center provide vocational counseling and job placement to around 20,000 persons with disability yearly, and with 50% success rate, over 1 million persons with disability receive monthly social benefit supported by 680 million state funding annually. Inclusive education is also prioritized. By 2022, 85% of persons with disability in hardship had access to social assistance.
I thank the representative of Vietnam for his statement. Dear colleagues, we exceeded the time allocated to this agenda item, and I have on my list Senegal to be followed by Solomon Islands as the last speakers for this session. So I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Sénégal se réjouit de participer à cette 17e conférence des États parties à la Convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées. Elle se félicite que le thème de cette session nous invite à bâtir une véritable culture de l'inclusion du handicap. Fort heureusement, ce thème cadre parfaitement avec les priorités de mon pays, qui, à travers la loi d'orientation sociale relative au handicap, s'est doté d'un cadre politique de référence permettant une prise en charge améliorée et l'intégration correcte des personnes handicapées dans notre société. La dite loi comprend près de 16 mécanismes d'inclusion du handicap, dont la mise en œuvre opérationnelle est facilitée par divers projets et programmes gouvernementaux adossés à un plan d'action national sur le handicap couvrant la période 2023-2027. En adéquation avec le thème général de la présente session, le Sénégal a mis en place un système innovant de protection sociale des personnes handicapées basé sur la carte d'égalité des chances. Cette carte, dont les bénéficiaires s'élèvent à 75 089 individus, est un mécanisme phare d'inclusion du handicap et un filet social multisectoriel dont la production et la délivrance permet aux handicapés d'accéder à divers services sociaux de base. Monsieur le Président, conscient que les situations de crise exacerbent les inégalités et accroissent la vulnérabilité des personnes avec un handicap, mon pays, à travers son plan d'organisation des secours pour prévenir les catastrophes, accorde une attention particulière à la gestion du handicap en situation de crise. Pour mémoire, en riposte à la COVID-19 a été mis en place un programme de résilience économique et sociale. En outre, dans une perspective d'autonomisation et du respect des droits des personnes handicapées pour un travail décent et des moyens de subsistance durables, le Sénégal déroule un programme national de réadaptation à base communautaire qui, à côté de la Direction générale de l'entrepreneuriat rapide, accroît les opportunités de financement des projets d'entreprise des personnes handicapées. De même, en vue d'un accès universel des personnes handicapées à l'emploi, la loi d'orientation sociale dispose respectivement dans ses articles 29 et 47 la réservation de quotas de 15% des emplois qui leur sont accessibles aux personnes handicapées et la mise en place d'un fonds d'appui à leur insertion économique. Enfin, pour une gestion optimale du handicap, le Sénégal reste ouvert à toute forme de coopération technique et financière avec les États membres, les organismes du système des Nations Unies et les autres partenaires compétents. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of Senegal for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Solomon Islands as our last speaker.
Mr. President, my delegation is honored to participate in the 17th conference for the first time as a state party, following my country's ratification of the convention on June 22nd, 2023, just under a year ago. We are here today to add our voice and pledge our commitment to the purposes and the principles of the convention. Furthermore, to demonstrate our solidarity with the global community to advance the full realization of the rights of persons with disabilities. Mr. President, over 10% of our population is experiencing various forms of disabilities. This is likely to increase with the high prevalence of non-communicable diseases nationally. The plight of persons with disabilities is exacerbated by the impacts of climate change, geographical spread of our islands, and competing priorities for limited resources. To demonstrate commitment to the convention, the government of Solomon Islands recently established the National Disability Inclusive Development Policy 2022 to 2030. This provides the framework for implementation and, more importantly, optimizes disability inclusion from public health focus to human rights, access to economic opportunities, improved education and healthcare services. Other complementary programs that form an important integral part of care and services for persons with disabilities are outlined in the Solomon Islands Rehabilitation Strategic Plan 2021 and to 2031 and the Solomon Islands Mental Health Policy. The translation and implementation of these policies, however, requires a whole-of-government approach together with stakeholders, including the consistent support and advocacy of the People with Disabilities of Solomon Islands Association. The government of Solomon Islands is committed to ensuring full and effective participation of people with disabilities at all levels. We do recognize we have shortcomings and therefore welcome partnerships that can enhance our national efforts. Currently, there are only 3 specialized schools in this country that provides training for children with disabilities. The provision of additional schools across the provinces with specialized trainers will ensure greater accessibility for persons and children with disabilities. Mr. President, in conclusion, Let us use this conference to reassess our global commitment to ensure full, equal, meaningful, and effective participation of persons with disabilities at all levels. We believe the Summit of the Future will provide a great opportunity to propel us closer to the full realization of human rights for all persons with disabilities and the achievement of the SDG agenda. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Solomon Islands for her statement. And now, dear colleagues, we will move to the next agenda item of our meeting, which is item 5C, interactive dialogue between states parties, UN entities, and other stakeholders. Thank you.
To speak.
And off it again.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all today to the final meeting of the 17th session of the COSP, namely the interactive dialogue among states parties, UN entities, and other stakeholders on the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD. Dear colleagues and friends, this year's conference has taken place under the overarching theme of rethinking disability inclusion in the current international juncture and ahead of the Summit of the Future. Indeed, the world finds itself at a critical juncture of historic proportions, with new and emerging threats combined with exacerbated existing challenges, testing the limits of the international norms and rules-based system which anchors us through the challenges we collectively face. With growing consensus that the system we have put in place, from financing for development to peace and security, are no longer fit for purpose on overall, and reinvigoration of international cooperation and partnership are direly indeed needed. Hence, the Summit of the Future heralds a pivotal opportunity for reconstituting global priorities and action for meeting the development needs and aspirations of the people of this planet by tackling gaps in global governance, reaffirming existing commitments to sustainable development, and moving towards a truly mutual system. However, it is absolutely clear that progress in achieving sustainable development, peace and security, and robust systems of global governance will be inadequate and uneven without the voices, contributions, and representations of persons with disabilities, a diverse global community of 1.3 billion citizens. Yet, regrettably, the exclusion of the needs and perspectives of persons with disabilities persists. The urgent call to rethink our global systems of governance is therefore echoed by the urgent call to rethink disability inclusion in the pressing context of our current juncture. Undoubtedly, since the adoption of the CRPD in 2008, there have been numerous ratifications by states parties, a total of 191 to date, and almost universal endorsement, marking a paradigm shift from a medicalized, paternalistic conception of disability to a social understanding of disability, wherein persons with disabilities are active right holders interacting with environmental and social barriers. In reality, this paradigm shift remains incomplete. In law, policy, and practice, persons with disabilities are still viewed as passive recipients of development rather than as active rights holders and agents of development. Looking ahead to the Summit of the Future, Rethinking Disability Inclusion mandates all actors and stakeholders, from the UN system to the state level to the grassroots, to ensure the meaningful inclusion of persons with disabilities in all aspects of decision and policy making on an equal basis with others, to shape and participate in all processes of the summit. This interactive dialogue, therefore, comprises an important forum to exchange knowledge and share good practices among states parties, UN partners, and civil society stakeholders, with the aim of aligning the work that we do with standards and principles of the CRPD, and to look ahead to the future with renewed commitment. Now I would like to warmly welcome our distinguished panelists for part one of today's interactive dialogue, representing the following UN entities: OCHA, Ms. Adam Wasornu, Director Operations and Advocacy, United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA; Mr. John Wilmoth, Officer in Charge Division for Inclusive Social Development, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA; Mr. Rio Hadda, Chief Equality Development and Rule of Law Section, New York Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights; Ms. Charlotte Vieswa McLean Nalpo, Global Disability Advisor, Lead Social Specialist, the World Bank; Ms. Sarah Lister, Head of Governance, United Nations Development Programme, UNDP; Mr. Yassine Samatar, Senior Multilateral Cooperation Specialist, International Labour Organization, ILO; Ms. Ola Abul Ghaib, Manager of the United Nations Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities; and Ms. Sitiraki Seru Makanawi, Civil Society Representative, Pacific Disability Forum. I will kindly invite each of our panelists to deliver their remarks for 5 minutes. We will then invite delegations and other observers to participate in an interactive discussion with the panel members. Delegations and participants may request the floor by pressing the button on their desk. Only after the floor is opened for questions or comments following the presentations. If you are given the floor, please unmute your microphone and indicate your name followed by the name of your delegation or organization. And please note, all interventions shall be strictly limited to no longer than 2 minutes with no exceptions. To kickstart this dialogue, it is my honor to introduce our first panelist, Ms. Edem Wasornu, Director of Operations and Advocacy at the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA. You have the floor.
Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here on behalf of USG Martin Griffiths, who is traveling and could not be here. The Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is an important convention, and as humanitarian workers, we see the impact of conflict, we see the impact of the difficulties that people with disabilities face. This is a personal issue for me. I have a nephew who's 18 years old who is autistic. And I was in Port Sudan just a few weeks ago, and there was an autistic child in the IDP IDP sites in Port Sudan. And it was really difficult to see a situation like that. This is something that humanitarian workers see every day, situations of people with disabilities. And it is truly an honor to be here, to be part of this conversation. In 2024, Excellencies, the trends in humanitarian action remained alarming. 300 million people worldwide need some form of humanitarian assistance. We know, we hear the numbers all the time. There are statistics that show that of these millions of people in need, a large percentage are people with disabilities. And this is something that is again, dear to our hearts as humanitarians. Of course, of these 300 million people in need, humanitarians aim to assist 182 million people in 72 countries. I throw these numbers out there just to show the vast numbers that humanitarians are dealing with in terms of people. Amidst this chaos, amidst every war, amidst every natural disaster, people, of course, with the most marginalized groups, such as persons with disabilities, and these people bear the brunt of a lot of challenges in the humanitarian landscape. They face greater risks of exploitation, they face violence, including sexual violence, and access constraints. Access is a huge issue on a daily basis, let alone a person with disabilities. And this is often overlooked in our rush to provide assistance. Inclusive humanitarian responses are not just a moral imperative. They are also essential for effective and sustainable responses. We have to, we commit to, we must do better. We uphold human rights and dignity by actively involving persons with disabilities in decision-making processes. This is a must. Providing essential services and services accessible to all, and addressing barriers. This, of course, fosters social cohesion, strengthens community resilience, and promotes sustainable peace building. The CRPD provides a comprehensive framework to ensure the rights and needs of persons with disabilities are fully addressed in all aspects of life, including humanitarian crises. OCHA is one of these signatories, and our strategic plan for 2023-26 commits to making humanitarian work more participatory, inclusive, gender responsive, and of course principled. Excellencies, in recent years, we've focused on ensuring that humanitarian needs assessments, response plans, and funds prioritize the needs and vulnerabilities identified by affected people. We'd like to thank our generous donors And through them, we've assisted over 7.4 million persons with disabilities with humanitarian funds in 2023. However, to truly foster the implementation of the CRPD in humanitarian settings, we must also consider several other crucial articles. Allow me to run through a few. Article 9, which of course emphasizes the need for accessibility in emergencies. This is a struggle. We must do better. Ensuring all facilities, services, and information are accessible to persons with disabilities. In line with Article 19, humanitarian actions should integrate and include persons with disabilities in all community activities, preventing isolation or marginalization during crises. And again, in all the countries I've visited in this role, some 12, 13 countries, I've come across persons with disabilities, and it is extremely clear that we must, again, include them as part of our humanitarian response plans. This has been a challenge, but it's something that humanitarians are committing to. Lastly, Article 22 stresses safeguarding the privacy of persons with disabilities, including managing their personal data. This crucial issue for the humanitarian system is necessary to ensure safe, ethical, and effective data management. OCHA has issued interagency operational guidance on data responsibility in this regard. There's insufficient time to detail all the relevant CRPD requirements for humanitarian action. However, the key point is that effective CRPD implementation in humanitarian settings requires concerted action from all stakeholders. More must be done by governments to ensure that persons with disabilities are accounted for in national preparedness and response plans. Humanitarian organizations must continue adopting inclusive and accessible practices, and their staff must be trained on the rights and needs of people with disabilities. Donors must foster the prioritization of sufficient funding for inclusive programs and hold their partners accountable to provide inclusive services and responses. Of course, most importantly, persons with disabilities must be at the heart of these efforts, including involved as key stakeholders and decision makers. Lastly, we must acknowledge pre-existing structural inequalities and inequities, as well as structural discrimination in many countries prior to crises. It's essential for humanitarian development and sometimes peace actors to collaborate from the start to achieve sustainable change. A few statistics very briefly. On average, some persons with disabilities die up to 20 years earlier than those without disabilities. Persons with disabilities face health inequities with twice the risk of developing conditions such as depression, asthma, diabetes, stroke, obesity, or poor oral health. Persons with disabilities are not a homogeneous population, and the risks that they are exposed vary greatly depending on intersectional factors, of course, gender, age, population group, etc., and their type of disability as well. Recommendations for stakeholders, my last points. 1, inclusive planning, I've alluded to that already. 2, accessibility. 3, participation. Persons with disabilities should be actively involved, and I can't underscore this, overstate this point. Funding, I've mentioned it before. Donors must prioritize funding for inclusive humanitarian activities, ensuring that resources are allocated. In the countries with conflict, where you can see the changing face of the society because of the explosive weapons in populated areas, or we can see that the change happens in conflict areas even after the humanitarian crisis descends into what it descends into. Finally, training, as in, again, I alluded to that. Humanitarian workers must do better, must do more when it comes to understanding how to work with persons with disabilities. Excellency, over to you. Thank you very much.
I thank Ms. Wasordu for her insightful presentation, and our next speaker is Mr. John Wilmoth, Officer in Charge, Division of Inclusive Social Development of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Mr. John, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, esteemed participants, I'm honored to join this interactive dialogue among states parties, the UN system, and civil society. I would like to share with you the main activities of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs in support of the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Over the past year, DESA continued to act as the secretariat for this conference, supporting both substantive and conference servicing activities. DESA also continued its leading role in the work of the Interagency Support Group for the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Pursuant to General Assembly Resolution 76/154 on implementation of the Convention, DESA undertook a study on the protection and safety of persons with disabilities in situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies. Also, in response to General Assembly Resolution 77/240, DESA conducted a study on the promotion and mainstreaming of easy-to-understand communication for accessibility for persons with disabilities. Both these studies were conducted in consultation with UN agencies, representative organizations of persons with disabilities, and other relevant stakeholders. The findings were presented in the report of the Secretary General on the status of the Convention and its optional protocol. Earlier this week, we held the pre-launch of an update of the Disability and Development Report, first published in 2018. The 2024 edition of this report assesses the state of progress towards the SDGs that is being made by, for, and with persons with disabilities. Against the backdrop of this evidence, the report identifies good practices and recommends actions to put the world on track to achieve the relevant goals and targets by 2030. The global analysis is based on an unprecedented quantity of data, including country-specific information on legislation and policies. The updated report helps us to understand the socioeconomic circumstances of persons with disabilities worldwide and the challenges and barriers they face in their daily lives, including during the COVID-19 pandemic. Although prepared by DESA, it is the outcome of a collective effort involving United Nations entities, country experts, and civil society, including organizations of persons with disabilities. The report's main findings were shared earlier this week at the pre-launch event organized by DESA together with the permanent missions of Japan, the Philippines, and Tanzania. DESA has collaborated with various partners to convene events on disability inclusion. Last December, for example, for the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, a panel discussion structured around 5 pillars of sustainable development, people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships, addressed major gaps in the realization of inclusive and sustainable development by, for, and with persons with disabilities, and called for enhanced actions and greater international cooperation. DESA's attention to improving data on persons with disabilities has continued, as have its efforts to support intergovernmental bodies that have engaged in this topic. For the 2024 session of the United Nations Statistical Commission, DESA coordinated the production of the report of the Secretary General on Disability Statistics, which was prepared jointly with the Washington Group on Disability Statistics and some international agencies. Implementation of the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy, launched in 2019, has continued to be a priority for DESA, which has been taking concrete actions to advance disability inclusion through mainstreaming as well as targeted interventions. DESA undertook various initiatives aimed at improving accessibility for delegates and observers with disabilities who participate in UN meetings. Examples include this conference, as well as the 2023 High-Level Political Forum and the Internet Governance Forum. For these events, DESA proactively solicited information about the needs of participants, made seating accommodations accordingly, and provided closed captioning and sign language interpretation, among other actions taken to improve accessibility. Representative organizations of persons with disabilities were consulted and engaged as partners throughout the planning of events and across all operations. DESA has continued its work on building national capacities for the effective inclusion of persons with disabilities, including a project carried out in Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Panama starting in 2022 on the social inclusion of children and youth with autism through engagement in sport. This project focuses on the training of coaches who use the knowledge acquired to provide sports activities for children and youth with autism. Thus far, more than 70 coaches have been trained and more than 90 children and youth with autism have participated in the sports activities. DESA stands ready to support member states, UN entities, civil society, and all relevant stakeholders to ensure that no persons with disabilities are left behind and to continue to advance the global implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities alongside the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Wilmot for his insightful presentation. I now invite our next distinguished panelist, Mr. Rio Hadda, Chief of Equality Development and Rule of Law Section at the New York Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Mr. Hadda, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is my honor to address the 17th session of the Conference of State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. As the Chair said earlier, today we stand at the critical moment. We are just 100 days before the summits of the future. Last year, when we commemorated the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, more than 30 states made pledges to strengthen efforts to implement disability rights, including by amending laws, establishing ombudspersons, improving their participation in the labor market, and protecting their rights in armed conflict. So as we look ahead to the Summit of the Future and next year's Second World Summits for Social Development, it is vital to carry forward such commitments with concrete actions that will truly ensure the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Excellencies, tremendous progress has been made since the adoption of the Convention almost 20 years ago. But still, many barriers continue to obstruct the full realization of rights of all persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities continue to struggle against deeply entrenched bias, damaging stereotypes, and unfounded irrational fears. The support and care systems they need are severely lacking, and where they do exist, many, particularly women and girls with disabilities, face shocking abuse and practices such as forced sterilization, treatment against their will, or institutionalization. Conflicts and disasters are having particularly severe and long-lasting effects on persons with disabilities, with the destruction or disruption of critical infrastructure, support services, and networks. It is hoped that the Pact for the Future and the Declaration on the Future Generations will articulate our vision with clarity and conviction to overcome these challenges. The transformation of care and support systems for current and future generations of persons with disabilities is key. The current care economy needs to be transformed into care and support systems that fully respect the rights of persons with disabilities, women and girls, and older persons. Human rights-based care and support systems would uphold the autonomy of persons with disabilities, enabling them to act with agency and live independently. As such, they are preconditions for the inclusion and participation of persons with disabilities in the communities on an equal basis with others. Dear colleagues, persons with disabilities and their representative organizations are and must remain an integral part of all decision-making processes. In Tunisia, our office has been working with the government and civil society to support the inclusion of persons with disabilities in decision-making including through the introduction of sign language and Braille for deaf people. In Mongolia, OSHR helped government to develop a housing program that aimed to improve the inclusion, accessibility, and quality of life for persons with disabilities and their families. And in many other countries, OSHR has been working with governments, UN partners, civil society, NHRIs, and OPDs on legislative and policy reforms, capacity building and ratification, reporting, and follow-up to the Convention. Excellencies, dear colleagues, disability rights offer precious common ground in which we can all work together and strengthen solidarity. By working with fully empowered people with disabilities and their representative organizations, we can translate their rights into lived realities. Our office stands ready to support you in every step of the way towards our transformed world. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Hada for his excellent presentation. Now I'm pleased to present our next panelist, Ms. Charlotte Viwiswa McLean-Lapo, Global Disability Advisor and Lead Social Specialist at the World Bank. Ms. McLean-Lapo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charlotte McLean-Lapo. I am the Disability Advisor at the World Bank. It is my pleasure and honor to represent the institution at the interactive dialogue on the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The CRPD underpins several aspects of our work at the World Bank, which addresses disability inclusion through its work streams on the environmental social framework and on social inclusion. At the Global Disability Summit in 2022, the World Bank updated its 10 commitments to disability inclusion, encompassing key areas such as education, digital development, data collection, gender, post-disaster reconstruction, transport, private sector investments, and social protection. In addition, the IDA 20 replenishment has introduced a standalone commitment to embed disability inclusion across core services, focusing on sectors such as education, health, social protection, water, urban, digital development, and transport. It is within these frameworks that the World Bank has been advancing efforts to support the implementation of the CRPD at a national level. For example, this support in Uzbekistan encompassed a wide range of activities aimed at strengthening legal frameworks, enhancing accessibility, and fostering digital inclusion. A critical aspect has been the comprehensive review and revision of national legislation to ensure compatibility with the CRPD. In addition, an accessibility audit was conducted in the city of Tashkent, accessing public infrastructures such as transportation system, public buildings, and digital services. To build local expertise and ensure sustainability of the CRPD implementation efforts, extensive training programs have been rolled out for over 500 stakeholders, covering the principles of universal design and accessibility, and practical measures to implement CRPD compliant policies and practices. The World Bank also provided technical support to the government of Romania in 2019 to develop a national strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities 2022 to 2027 through a participatory process with persons with disabilities and their representative organizations. The World Bank has also contributed to the development of a national authority for the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities, designed to monitor the progress over 30 types of actors engaged in the implementation of the strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, regarding Article 31 on statistics and data collection, the World Bank is in partnership with Microsoft, GIZ, and the Disability Data Initiative at Fordham University to establish a disability data hub to access and use disability data across human development indicators and sectors. This hub will collate, aggregate, and catalog multiple data sources and provide a user-friendly and accessible interface whereby data users will be able to interact with the data and select countries and indicators of interest. The Disability Data Hub will be publicly launched by the World Bank at the 3rd Global Disability Summit in April of 2025, hosted by the Federal Republic of Germany, the Kingdom of Jordan, and the International Disability Alliance in Berlin. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to Article 24 on education, in 2019, the World Bank, in collaboration with the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation and the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, launched the Inclusive Education Initiative to foster inclusive education for children with disabilities across the world. Since its inception, the IEI has supported activities in 18 countries, dispersing more than $10 million US. The IEI's in-country interventions enhance stakeholder capacity and service delivery at a national level, addressing the supply and demand sides of the ecosystem. More specifically, in Rwanda, the initiative led to the ratification of the Marrakesh Treaty. As part of this initiative, the Knowledge Hub has a dedicated knowledge repository on inclusive education, and it houses more than 500 resources on the topic. The Inclusive Education Community of Practice on Disability Inclusive Education has close to 50,000 members, and it is a platform for sharing best practices, fostering collaboration, and driving innovation in the field of inclusive education. I would like to close by saying that the World Bank stands committed to ensuring disability inclusion and the implementation of the CRPD at national level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McLean-Lapo, for your contribution. Now it's my honor to present our next panelist, Ms. Sarah Lister, Head of Governance at the United Nations Development Programme. Ms. Lister, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, I would like to express my gratitude to the President of the Conference of State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities for inviting UNDP to this interactive dialogue at the 17th session of the conference. A session that comes at a critical juncture, as others have already noted. The update to the Disability and Development Report released a few days ago, as mentioned by my colleague from DESA, highlighted that compound planetary crises and the stagnation and reversal of progress on the majority of the SDGs disproportionately impacts persons with disabilities. At the same time, we prepare for a summit of the future that seeks a new international consensus on how to create a better present and future that leaves no one behind. UNDP believes that this promise can only be kept with and by persons with disabilities, with the CRPD and the 2030 Agenda as our mutually reinforcing guides in this journey. This means ensuring the meaningful engagement and representation of persons with disabilities in the discussions and negotiations around the Pact for the Future. It also means accelerating efforts specifically on the themes of this year's conference, which lie at the core of the Summit of the Future. I would like to highlight a few recommendations in this regard that strongly align with the papers developed for the 3 conference roundtables. First, technological development and its governance should be inclusive by design, from assistive technology to national digital public infrastructure, or DPI. In Bermuda, UNDP supported national authorities in launching the National Disability Register, an accessible smartphone app that collects data on and from persons with disabilities to inform a more inclusive delivery of public goods and services, while preserving their rights to privacy and protection. We also launched the DPI Safeguards Initiative with the Office of the UN Secretary-General's Envoy on Technology to strengthen multi-stakeholder international cooperation for safer and more inclusive DPI, including for persons with disabilities. UNDP's own internal digital systems are also fully accessible, with 100% of our corporate platforms supporting accessible technologies. Second, national and local strategies and plans for disaster risk reduction and recovery should be designed and implemented with, by, and for persons with disabilities and their representative organizations, recognizing the diversity within their communities. In Vietnam, for example, we work with local organizations of persons with disabilities to promote gender-responsive and disability-inclusive budgeting within disaster risk reduction efforts, to address the inequalities faced by women and girls with disabilities before, during, and after disasters. Experiences such as the one in Vietnam and other countries are detailed in our recently published policy brief, A Resilient Future for All, Advancing Disability Inclusion in Disaster Risk Reduction and Recovery. The brief provides guidance and best practices from UNDP's offices worldwide. As my last recommendation, I would like to stress the need to create inclusive and equitable job markets, with laws and policies reviewed and updated to ensure access to education, training, and social protection for persons with disabilities, working with governments, private sector, persons with disabilities, and their representative organizations. For example, we are providing grants for public-private partnership initiatives to improve the socioeconomic reintegration and employability of persons with disabilities in Ukraine. We are also working with the Ministry of Labour and the National Council on Disability of the Dominican Republic to enhance employment opportunities for persons with disabilities in the country through trainings, awareness campaigns, and multi-stakeholder partnerships. And of course, internally, we strive to become an inclusive employer for our colleagues with disabilities, with a new diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy that aims to ensure that all UNDP personnel enjoy an enabling, inclusive work environment. Excellencies, colleagues, let me end by thanking once again the presidency of this conference for convening this much-needed discussion and reaffirming UNDP's commitment to the full implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lister, for your presentation. Our next panelist is Mr. Yassine Samatar, Senior Multilateral Cooperation Specialist at the International Labour Organization, ILO. Mr. Samatar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, esteemed panelists, I'm pleased to provide the following remarks on behalf of the ILO Special Representative to the United Nations, Ms. Cynthia Samuel Olujuwon, who was not able to be here with you today, but nonetheless wanted me to stress her commitment to the promotion of rights of persons with disabilities. Disability inclusion is integral to the ILO's constitution and mandate, as it embodies our commitment to promoting social justice and ensuring that all individuals, regardless of their abilities, have the right to work in conditions of freedom, equity, security, and human freedom. Over the past 5 years, we have made significant strides in advancing disability inclusion, driven by our active participation in the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy. The ILO fully embraces the UNDIS framework and its rigorous annual reporting requirements, as they provide us with the robust structure needed to realize our vision of comprehensive disability inclusion. The ILO's achievement under this strategy are the direct result of the unity of purpose from our senior leadership, particularly our Director General, Mr. Gilbert Huangbo, who has firmly established a mandate for the ILO to become an employer of choice for persons with disabilities. An example of this commitment was the session on disability inclusion held by our global management team at the annual meeting in January. Having said this, I wish to offer 3 main reflections of the ILO's work today regarding the theme of our panel. First is the area of networks. Before we began implementing the UNDIS, we understood that we needed to take time to build a culture of sharing, learning, and leading on disability inclusion. The first group we developed was our ILO UNDIS custodians, a dozen or so colleagues throughout the organization are responsible for the rollout of their particular UNDIS indicators, from employment to accessibility of premises, IT and meetings, to communications, to programming, to procurement. In addition, we also have a network of about 100 ILO colleagues at our headquarters and field offices who form what we call the Disability Champions Network. Our champions are staff throughout the ILO, admin staff, technical specialists, directors of units and departments, people who are catalysts for change, continuously improving accessibility and inclusion in the offices and departments where they work. We organize regular meetings with them to provide guidance and advice on how to address disability inclusion in their daily work. Like other UN entities and comments made here today, the ILO has an independent group of ILO staff with disabilities and staff with dependents with disabilities who formed the Employee Resource Group on Disability Inclusion. Second is the area of learning journeys on disability inclusion. Building on disability awareness among our staff is key to achieving the goal of being a fully inclusive organization. We have an online course which is mandatory throughout our organization for staff, where they can explore the numerous ways of looking at disability and develop a new vocabulary for inclusion. We also had the good fortune to work with the UNDIS team and our International Training Center in Turin to develop a five-week course for all UNDIS focal points throughout the UN system. This is the final week of the 5th edition of this highly appreciated course, and there'll be a new edition in the autumn. Third is the area of disability inclusion strategies. Over the past 4 years, our disability inclusion work was supported by the adoption of an organization-wide disability inclusion policy and our first multi-annual strategy for the years 2020 to 2023. Our strategy mirrors the UNDIS accountability framework, but adapts it to the ILO. We're currently in the process of drafting a new strategy to cover the next 3 years. And to prepare for this, we undertook a disability inclusion survey, as well as an independent evaluation of the first strategy, both of which have provided useful insights on the areas which require more improvement. The progress so far, as reflected in our last report submitted to the UNDIS team here in New York, and the new strategy will be presented to our own governing body in the autumn. Before I conclude, Mr. President, I wish to stress that we have not gotten everything right, and we still have a way to go before we can consider ourselves a fully disability inclusive organization and a UN system employer of choice for persons with disabilities. But we will continue to collaborate with other UN entities and all stakeholders to ensure that we can learn from each other and also promote the required system-wide changes in the multilateral fora. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Samatar for his contribution. I now invite Ms. Ola Abul Ghaib, Manager of the United Nations Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to share her insights. Ms. Abul Ghaib, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, colleagues, and delegates, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share our perspectives and learning on this very important dialogue. As you all know, UNBRBD is the only fund available to support countries to implement their commitments around their agreement to the principles of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This COSP is very vital, as colleagues mentioned. It's vital because we're close to celebrate 20 years of the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We're also very close to start the discussion of the upcoming Sustainable Development Goals, and we're very close also to discuss the Summit of the Future, which is kickstarting that process. What we see on the ground through the operation of 93 countries' work since our establishment has proven that, unfortunately, still until now, thousands and millions of persons with disabilities are still striving to access basic services. Some of them, unfortunately, are at a very life-threatening situations. So whether in development or humanitarian context, we know from our countries of operation that still it's a long way to go. However, we also see from countries' work that change is possible. We're seeing that there is more and more policy opportunities where disability is being addressed. Colleagues have mentioned discussions at national and global level around the care and support systems. We also know that it is very vital to upcome the discussions around disability within climate change processes. And that is something that PRBD has been and will continue to be committed to support governments to make sure that those discussions are not missing disability. I would like to share with the audience some reflections from our ongoing programs this year in 65 countries. What we see on the ground, that governments are opening more doors to discussions on disability inclusion. We're also very pleased to report that within the space of our multi-stakeholder dynamic on programs at national level, that organizations of persons with disabilities are provided the equal space to be recognized as partners in whatever reforms are happening at country level. We're also very pleased to report that our 2023 annual report have demonstrated that changes at national level in relation to national policies, laws, and systems are happening as we speak. But some learnings that we need to capture is that we need more evidence. We need more evidence of what is working at national level for other countries to learn from. We need to scale up what is working because change needs time, and that's something we are also considering as a fund, how we can take that for our future thinking. We also need to know that investments are needed and more coordination is needed because we understand that the context globally is very challenging in terms of investments. But also we need to understand that no matter what we do, we cannot only focus on disability-focused discussions. We need to make sure that mainstream discussions are happening. And on final remarks, I would like to state that PRBD Fund remains committed to its mission to accompany countries where they are in disability inclusion. We're very much looking forward to continue the collaboration with the upcoming Global Disability Summit organizers, Germany, Jordan, and the International Disability Alliance, to foresee the important role we can play to help countries that come forward with commitments to make them a reality in terms of implementation. Thank you all for working collaboratively with us, and we look forward to engaging in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abul Ghaib, for your presentation. Our final panelist of today's interactive dialogue, representing civil society, is Mr. Sitaraki Seru Makanawai of the Pacific Disability Forum. Mr. Makanawai, it's our honor to have you here with us today. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be speaking at this session on behalf of civil society. I represent the Pacific Disability Forum, a regional organization of persons with disabilities in the Pacific, and also a member of International Disability Alliance. I also speak today as a person with disability, an indigenous person with disability, a person with disability from the small island developing states, and a person with disability from the global south. I emphasize different aspects of my identity because all too often in legislation, policy, programming, and practice, the multiple intersecting identities are often the cause of discrimination faced by persons with disabilities, exacerbating the stigma, marginalization, and exclusion that we face. Over the past several days, we have heard from member states development partners, and other stakeholders on the efforts to implement CRPD. We learned that technological advancement has the power to significantly enhance the lives of persons with disabilities and inclusion in their empowerment by providing access to essential services, improving communication and mobility, by fostering greater participation in society. We are reminded that persons with disabilities are disproportionately affected before, during, and after situational risk and humanitarian emergencies, and are vulnerable to the effects of conflict, climate change, and health emergencies. We're informed that the rights of persons with disabilities, including the right to decent work and livelihoods, are well recognized in the CRPD and in some key internationally agreed development instruments like the 2030 Agenda. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these efforts must be matched by strong actions, including targeted funding, disability disaggregated data, and inbuilt framework that allow the full and effective participation of persons with disabilities and the organizations they represent. Excellencies, the overarching theme of this year's conference is rethinking disability inclusion in the current international juncture and ahead of the Summit of the Future. I want to ask us this question as we rethink disability inclusion, whether it be at national, local, or global level. Will disability inclusion alone get persons with disabilities where they should be in the future? In my humble view, the short answer is no, and would like to propose that we consider the significance of disability equity as we rethink disability inclusion. Yes, inclusion will get our seat at the table, but it's equity that will transform that table to ensure full, effective, meaningful participation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we close the 17th session of the Conference of State Parties of the CRPD, I draw attention to the Summit of the Future that will be happening September this year, where the member states will also develop the Pact for the Future. It is important that the concerns of persons with disabilities raised at this conference get the same attention they deserve in 3 months' time. All ongoing negotiations across the different processes must be coherent in their approach towards inclusion of and equity for persons with disabilities. We can no longer be working in silos, as it only perpetuates the cycle of inclusion and marginalization, leaving persons with disabilities further behind. Friends, you cannot achieve inclusion of and equity for persons with disabilities without breaking that cycle. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Makanawi, for your insightful presentation, and I would like to thank all panelists for their interesting presentations and thought-provoking insights. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let us now move on to the second segment of the interactive dialogue, the interactive discussion between the panelists and delegations and other stakeholders. The following segment offers the opportunity for delegations and other stakeholders to request the floor to make brief comments relevant to the current discussion. Please be reminded that the delegations and participants may request the floor by pressing the button on your desk in order to ensure an inclusive and interactive discussion in line with the decision of the Bureau. After every 5 states parties make their interventions, I shall invite 1 NGO, 1 UN entity, and 1 national human rights institution to take the floor. In a moment, I shall shortly call and give the floor on a first-come, first-served basis to the first 5 inscribed delegations. When called to the floor, please unmute your microphone and indicate your name, followed by the name of your delegation or organization. Please refrain from reading prepared statements. You may speak for no more than 2 minutes with no exception. The floor is now open for comments. I recognize on my list Guinea to be followed by Honduras. Guinea, you have the floor.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. J'ai suivi avec beaucoup d'intérêt les différentes interventions qui ont été faites. Je m'intéresse en particulier au rapport mondial sur le handicap. Le rapport mondial sur l'avant-dernier qui date de 2011 a été très déterminant parce qu'il nous a aidé à comprendre quelle est la meilleure approche du handicap. D'une approche initialement basée sur l'aspect médical, le rapport nous a aidé à aller vers une approche sociale et peut-être même au-delà. On nous a parlé depuis avant-hier du dernier rapport 2024. La délégation guinéenne aimerait savoir à quel moment ça va être disponible et comment est-ce qu'on peut entrer en possession de cet outil d'une très grande importance. Merci. Mon nom, c'est Mohamed Diaby, directeur national des personnes vulnérables de Guinée.
Je remercie le représentant du Guinée. I give now the floor to the representative of Honduras.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Honduras reitera su compromiso con el cumplimiento de la Convención sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad y al tenor del artículo 33 presenta la propuesta de la instalación del mecanismo gubernamental de cumplimiento a las recomendaciones internacionales, lo que incluye también la transversalización del enfoque de inclusión en los planes de gestión de riesgos y contingencias. Al respecto al panel, nos gustaría conocer de manera puntual 2 o 3 experiencias exitosas en las cuales la transversalización del enfoque de inclusión en los planes de gestión de riesgos ha salvado vidas de personas con discapacidad. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Honduras, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico.
México ha sido uno de los principales promotores de la Convención desde sus inicios. Hoy en día celebramos el impacto significativo que ha tenido en la vida de millones alrededor del mundo, logrando avances en áreas como la educación, el empleo, la salud, la participación política y promoviendo siempre enfoques de derechos humanos. Reconocemos el papel esencial que han jugado las entidades e iniciativas de las Naciones Unidas en este sentido, promoviendo y asistiendo en la aplicación de la Convención. Destacamos la labor del Comité sobre los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad, el Programa de las Naciones Unidas para la Promoción de los Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad y su fondo, así como la Estrategia de la Inclusión de la Discapacidad de las Naciones Unidas, entre otros. Hacemos un llamado a que los estados profundicen su colaboración con estas entidades y apoyen estas iniciativas. Sin embargo, reconocemos que los retos a los que nos enfrentamos son aún más grandes que los avances que hemos logrado. Por ello, planteo 2 preguntas al foro. ¿Qué estrategias y medidas específicas se pueden poner en práctica para atender de manera efectiva los contextos diversos que amplifican las barreras a las que se enfrentan las personas con discapacidad, especialmente aquellas con identidades interseccionales y sujetas a múltiples formas de discriminación? Y la segunda pregunta es, ¿qué mejores prácticas han identificado para optimizar la aplicación de políticas alineadas con la Convención a nivel local y específicamente para expandir su alcance a las comunidades más marginadas? Muchas gracias.
I thank Mexico for his comments, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kenya.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the Chair. My name is Isaac Mwaura. I'm the official government spokesperson of the Republic of Kenya, a person with albinism and disability, of course, and today is the International Albinism Awareness Day, reflecting on a decade later of what we've been able to achieve. Chair, my concern is that it is now 18 years since we started the CRPD convention on this same floor, this committee room 4. And as we move to the 18th Conference of State Parties, it is important that we start reflecting on what gains have we been able to make, because clearly 18 years ago, we didn't even have the kind of representation that we have in government and other institutions, including international development organizations, so that then we are able to know whether are we really making progress or really we are mark timing. I think it's important to note that it takes about 20 years to resolve a problem. And certainly, for sure, we are not where we were many years ago. So when you look at the 18th, 19th, possibly even the 20th Conference of State Parties, as we make the resolutions, I would want to indulge upon the organizers at UNDESA and the others to make sure that then we refocus our energies, particularly also going forward. And I had Charlotte McCain speaking very clearly about the issue of data and the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence and generative AI, and how we can leverage on this in order to encompass that which then constitutes the general knowledge of persons with disabilities, but also to have new technologies that, of course, will enable us as persons with disabilities to overcome the various barriers that we have in society. Otherwise, I think it is important to say that we made good progress, but it's important to reflect that the future cannot be considered.
I thank the representative of Kenya. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Namibia.
Thank you, Say. Economic inclusion of people with disabilities is a cornerstone for economic growth, but as I'm listening to the panelists there, it's very clear and regrettable that people with disabilities continue to face discrimination and exclusion from economy in terms of employment, skills training, and education, and as well as other critical areas. And I really would just like to know, because we are hardly working on the tangible solutions, as the spokesperson of Kenya has just said. We are just talking and talking, but what are the solutions that we are coming up with so that this exclusion of people with disabilities can be done away with? The attitudinal of the community, it's still there. People are being encouraged to apply for employment, but once they come into the local where they get an interview, they will be looked at as strangers who cannot contribute meaningfully to the economy. What can we do and to work on this and find tangible solutions? Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Namibia, and now I give the floor to the representative of NGO Do the Dream Youth Development Initiative. You have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, thank you for convening this audacious meeting. Having learned from UNDP, ILO, World Bank, DISA, and other stakeholders their role in the persons of disability over the time, we realize the cycle of prosperity which communicates to the persons of disability, the past, present, and future, is missing. The cycle which is continuous for the persons of disability comes with product, presence, places, power, and purpose must be communicated more to the UN system, DESA, World Bank, and other stakeholders to build persons of disabilities purpose as a living thing in adopting the role as a mission that is possible. Persons of disabilities perspectives must demonstrate and democratize inclusive laws across generations. Product and presence must serve as a testament of their capability for sustainability. Places and power, with the support of stakeholders and agencies, innovative acts and acts of persons of disabilities can foster sustainability as an economy. As shared by Dr. Lan, that purpose is a living thing, and an African leader, Dr. Sam Adeyemi, communicate that in adversity lies advancement, for embracing cycle of prosperity for persons of disability because the improved economy. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Do the Dream Youth Development Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your interesting comments and questions posed to the panel. I will now give the floor to our distinguished panelists to provide their responses to the questions raised. We would kindly ask each panelist to limit their response to approximately 2 minutes. On behalf of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. John Wilmuth, officer in charge of the Division of the Inclusive Social Development, let us begin with you. You have the floor, Mr. John.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to address the question from Guinea about when the 2024 report will be released. As you're probably aware, there was a pre-launch event earlier this week in which we shared the initial findings. And there is a rather extensive executive summary that has already been published online. It's about 20 pages, so it's quite a detailed executive summary. And the full report will become available this summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rio Hadda, Chief Equality Development and Rule of Law Section, New York Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for the Human Rights. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to take up the issue of the importance of the data collection and evidence-based policies. Obviously, the disaggregated data can help states to make more evidence policy that not only improve the inclusion of disability, but also monitor the implementation of the covenant and the obligations of states. At the same time, we also need to be conscious that the process of data collection itself should be based on human rights principles so that it does not do harm to the rights of privacy and increase stigma further. So the OSHR has published information and tools on human rights-based data collection and monitoring. I also like to take this opportunity to also mention that we have also launched recently practical guidance on the establishing and strengthening independent monitoring frameworks, which plays an important role in the implementation of the convention as per the Article 33.2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hadda. Ms. Charlotte Vuizwa McLean-Lapo, Global Disability Advisor, Lead Social Specialist, the World Bank. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to just quickly speak to the point around intersectionality and just recognize that it really is a critical area that I think we all need to do better at. We recognize that poverty is multidimensional and that people have different identities. And therefore, it is incumbent on us to not just look at a person using a particular lens, disability. It's important to look at that person as a woman, in my case, as a brown woman as well. And so I think that that is a really important area that we need to do better at. We are beginning to do some work in that regard. We're beginning to work more closely with my counterparts at the bank that work on Indigenous people to ensure that within the work that we do to support Indigenous people, that we're thinking about Indigenous people with disabilities. Similarly, I work very closely with my colleague, the advisor on sexual orientation and gender identity, and again, therein ensuring that we're addressing LGBTIQ individuals who have disabilities. We need to do this across the board because that will make for better design and will make sure that we address all people irrespective of their identities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sarah Lister, Head of Governance at UNDP. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'll pick up a couple of points from the distinguished representatives from Honduras and Namibia. The representative from Honduras asked about good examples on disaster risk reduction. And I think at UNDP we have a number of good examples. We've seen the development of a mobile app in the Bahamas, which provides accessible natural disaster alerts along with wider social services for people, access to persons with disabilities, and similarly in Indonesia, a project is using digital technologies to enhance disaster risk assessments, focusing on inclusivity for persons with disabilities. I mentioned in my overall remarks this policy brief that we've recently published, and we'd be very happy to work further with you and your team in looking at some of those examples. The representative from Namibia asked about progress in economic opportunities. Again, at UNDP, we have a number of examples. In Turkmenistan, for example, in Ghana, we support persons with disabilities by providing sustainable agricultural opportunities, food security, irrigation systems, and so forth. Perhaps more broadly, I hear a level of frustration in the room about too much talk and not enough progress that we have seen and not enough bringing together of good examples. From my perspective of head of governance at UNDP, I think one of the things we look at is a focus on inclusive institutions more broadly, particularly as we head into the review of Goal 16 at the HLPF this summer, that making institutions accountable, inclusive and responsive is one way also of scaling up and accelerating the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I move now to Mr. Aurélien Buffler, Chief of Policy and Planning at OCHA. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to take maybe the question on example of saving lives. So as Edem Gosonu said, humanitarians adopted the Charter on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action in 2016, and we already see how humanitarian organizations are integrating provision of the Charter. We particularly see it in the data collection and analysis by humanitarians, which makes persons with disabilities much more visible at the assessment stage of the humanitarian response. And we see already some impact in terms of programming which saves lives. So for instance, I'm going to take the example here of Ukraine, where some of the programs have been adapted to better serve people with disability who are some difficulties to move away from the front line and make sure that assistance reach them. This is one example, but of course there's many examples like that across emergencies. Over.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Aurélien. Now I move to Mr. Yassine Samatar, Senior Multilateral Cooperation Specialist, International Labour Organization. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The ILO's commitment to disability inclusion is obviously not just a mandate, it's a mission we approach with rigor and resolve. You've heard our interventions this morning in terms of what we do to promote the rights of persons with disabilities in the world of work. And obviously we've had various examples on how collaboration, innovating policies, and persistent advocacy can create inclusive workplaces. Many thanks to the member states that have raised, that have shared examples on how we can be much more instrumental in shaping our initiatives and refining our approaches. And obviously our journey towards becoming a fully disability inclusive and equitable organization is ongoing, and we recognize that there is still much more to be done. Regarding the question on cross-cutting initiatives and economic opportunities, again, this morning I noted our ongoing efforts on inclusion of people with disabilities in the world of work, which aims to integrate disability inclusion across various sectors, including education, employment, social protection, and vocational training. We work with governments, employers and workers' organizations and civil society, and through that we're striving to create comprehensive strategies that ensure persons with disabilities have equal opportunities for decent work. In addition, our ILO Prospects initiative creates strong partnerships between humanitarian and development actors to leverage comparative advantages and improve coordination and efficiency to boost overall impact for refugees and host communities, including people with disabilities. To conclude, Mr. President, 80 years ago, our Declaration of Philadelphia recognized that there cannot be peace without social justice, and this includes what we're continuously striving for, which is to try to ensure that we have an environment where the rights and needs of persons with disabilities are prioritized, fostering resilience, equity, and long-term development that benefits all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samatar. I now give the floor to Ms. Ula Abul Ghaib, Manager of the United Nations Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. You have the floor, Ms.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to pick up on the question with regards to how to make sure we're addressing the underrepresented groups at national and policy reforms. The learning from what we have done in our programs is that two key elements we need to take into consideration, whether in development or humanitarian context. I know it tends to be harder in the humanitarian context, but the key issue is to connect as early as possible with the representatives of those groups, whether children, adults, families that represent them and make sure that their rights and needs are addressed in whatever is designed at national level. So consultation is key, but also it goes beyond consultation. It's the partnership on the onset of the implementation and the monitoring further. So that is one key element, which is the engagement and hearing the voice of those groups at early on stage. The second one is how do we address those issues within the programs, national policies, and systems reforms. And it has to be addressing that into two tracks approach, because we know there are specific policies, services that are specific to those parts of the community of disability. However, we should not forget that along the mainstream discussions, this issue needs to be addressed equally. And this, in many cases, has been missed. And that's why it's a reminder to all of us today that this is a crucial issue. Otherwise, addressing disability also requires equity within the disability community, and we call for that to be given more attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abul Ghaib. I now give the floor to Mr. Setaraki Seru Makanawi, Civil Society Representative, Pacific Disability Forum. You have the floor, Mr.
Thank you,
Makanawi.
thank you, Mr. President. As representative of civil society, 2 points from our side. One is that whatever you do with us, that you please do understand there are preconditions to inclusion that will need to be considered, that will need to be even at times paid for, then it needs to be accommodated. So please, not just inclusion, but there are preconditions inclusion, make sure they're addressed. Number two is genuine, meaningful engagement with persons with disabilities, that will not be taken for a ride, that those exercises that when you have to do to engage with persons with disabilities in a representative organization, it's not a T crossing, an I dotting, or just a check box ticking exercise. Please work with us and mean business when you work with us, because we want to also work with you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Makanawi, and thank you for your responses. And once again, I extend my warm thanks to the panel for your contributions and participation today. Ladies and gentlemen, I kindly ask for your patience as we rearrange the podium and move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you.
Very good. Very good.
Distinguished delegates, I now move on to the next agenda item, that is item 6, decisions to be considered for adoption by Conference of States Parties. Colleagues, the Bureau, in consultation with our regional groups, proposed to this conference 3 decisions. The draft text of these 3 decisions was introduced to delegations via your regional representatives in the Bureau, seeking approval by consensus by the 10th of May 2024. Since no objection was received by the determined deadline in my capacity as the President of the Bureau and the Conference, may I invite States Parties to take action to endorse these proposals, by which we would decide, first, that the 18th session will be scheduled tentatively to take place from the 10th to 12th of June 2025. Second, that we recommend to the Secretary General that future sessions of the conference be provided adequate resources and support, including for the accessibility of facilities and services, for convening 6 official meetings over 3 days. And third, to further request the Secretary General to inform us in due course the issuance of the report of this session of the conference. I see no objection. May I take it that the conference would adopt the decisions as proposed? It is so decided. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the closing session of the conference. I would like to invite the Vice Presidents of the conference, distinguished representatives from Georgia, Greece, Panama, and Sri Lanka, to say a few words before we close the meeting. First, I welcome Ms. Ekaterina Lotkipanidze, Vice President of the conference from Georgia, to make her final remarks. Ekaterina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, at the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to the Chair of our Bureau, His Excellency Permanent Representative of Tunisia, Mr. Tarek Ladeb, for his leadership and guidance throughout the whole preparatory work for the COSP during the last 2 years. I applaud the Bureau members, my dear colleagues, for their tireless efforts to make CRPD COSP17 session a success. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to the Secretariat, to DESA, for their valuable support and technical assistance. A special gratitude goes to all the interpreters, sign language interpreters, and technical staff of the COSP17 for their dedication and hard work to ensure successful conference. On a personal note, let me reiterate that as an individual who had experienced a form of disability, I'm particularly honored to represent my country, Georgia, for the first time in the CRPD COSP Bureau from EEG Group, and use this opportunity in order to further advance the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities at the international level. Dear colleagues, this year's conference took place under the overarching theme of rethinking disability inclusion in the current international junction and ahead of the summit of the future. Indeed, the current international junction is marked by complex global crises with far-reaching and profound ramifications affecting all aspects of sustainable development. In this challenging context, the rights, voices, and contributions of persons with disabilities in all their diversity must be protected, promoted, and strengthened. As we're wrapping up the COSP17 after 3 days of marathon of wide range and productive discussions, roundtables, and side events, exploring innovative ways to promote and advance the rights of persons with disabilities, it is our joint responsibility to take stock to all the initiatives and innovative ideas that has been proposed during past 3 days and start translating them into concrete actions to make sure that the next year, when we gather again here in New York for the next COSP18, we deliver on our promise to leave no one behind and create equal opportunities for the persons with disabilities every day and at all levels. I thank you.
Thank you, Ekaterine, for your remarks. I now invite Ms. Alexandra Alexandridou, Vice President of the Conference from Greece, to share her remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished colleagues, it has been an honor for Greece and for me personally to serve as Vice Chair at the Bureau of the Conference, representing WEOG for the past 2 years. The annual meeting of state parties to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is one of the most important international events to discuss issues relating to CRPD. Having been ratified by 191 countries thus far, it is the convention with the highest number of signatories. As we have heard during this year's discussions, many initiatives have been taken and efforts have been made over the years since the adoption of the Convention, and considerable progress has already been achieved. Nevertheless, there are still gaps in implementation that we need to address, and we will do so given the determination and commitment. At this point, I wish to acknowledge with sincere appreciation the trust shown to Greece by the WEOG member states, the support by my colleagues, the Chair, the Permanent Representative of Tunisia, and the Vice Chairs of the Conference, as well as the invaluable support and service of the Secretariat, notably UNDESA, all the interpreters, card service providers, and sign language interpreters, among many others who worked tirelessly behind the scenes and helped make this conference such a notable success. On a national note, I would like to thank the President of the National Accessibility Authority of Greece, who participated this year as a speaker in Roundtable 1, contributing his expertise in the applications of artificial intelligence in facilitating the needs of persons with disabilities. Indeed, as we are wrapping up the discussions of COSP17 and looking ahead to the Summit of the Future, it is clear that the role of digital technologies has become more relevant than ever. Dear colleagues, let me conclude by thanking you once more for this incredible experience of serving at the Bureau. Wish the next Bureau lots of success and hope to see you all again during next year's COSP18. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. I now invite Ms. Marilyn Thompson, Vice President of the Conference representing Panama, to share her remarks.
Thank you, Chair. I will deliver my remarks in Spanish. Al concluir el mandato de Panamá como vicepresidencia del Buró de la Conferencia de los Estados Partes de la CRPD, es un gran honor para mí el poder reflexionar sobre nuestros esfuerzos y logros colectivos de los últimos 2 años. Los temas y subtemas de la pasada COSP16 establecieron una base sólida para políticas y estrategias nacionales alineadas con la CRPD, mientras que este año la COSP17 permitió trasladar estos temas a un contexto internacional mucho más amplio, enfatizando la cooperación y la preparación para el futuro, reforzando la continuidad de los logros y esfuerzos en curso para la promoción de los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. Este año hemos tenido la mayor cantidad de oradores inscritos en el debate general de la conferencia, lo que refleja el cada vez más creciente interés y compromiso con la inclusión de la discapacidad. El tema general de este año, repensar la inclusión de la discapacidad en la coyuntura internacional actual y de cara a la cumbre del futuro, ha guiado nuestras discusiones y acciones hacia un mundo más inclusivo a través de soluciones innovadoras que logren transformar las vidas de las personas con discapacidad. Para Panamá ha sido un privilegio poder ser parte de este buró bajo el liderazgo del embajador Tarek Ladeb, representante permanente del Túnez ante la ONU, y trabajar con compañeros, nuestros vicepresidentes, Marwa de Tunisia, Sujish Wara de Sri Lanka, Ekaterina de Georgia y Alexandra de Grecia, con un espíritu de colaboración, respeto, comunicación y transparencia. Panamá continuará trabajando con la promoción y defensa de los derechos de las personas con discapacidad, tanto a nivel nacional como en el ámbito multilateral. Tal y como compartido por nuestra Directora Nacional de Políticas Sectoriales de la Secretaría Nacional de Discapacidad, nuestro país ha dado pasos significativos en este sentido con el desarrollo del primer Plan Nacional de Accesibilidad Universal 2022-2032 y la realización de la segunda encuesta nacional de discapacidad, actualmente en etapa de tabulación de datos. Sin embargo, dichos logros conviven con importantes desafíos que sin duda alguna deben ser superados en los próximos años para que las personas con discapacidad puedan ser agentes activos y contribuir a generar las transformaciones necesarias que les permitan vivir una vida digna, de forma independiente y participar plenamente en todos los aspectos de la sociedad. Panamá queda a disposición de la delegación que asuma la próxima vicepresidencia de la conferencia en representación del GRULAC para brindarles nuestro apoyo en todo lo que necesiten. Adicionalmente, quisiera expresar mi profundo agradecimiento a la Secretaría por su apoyo al Buró y su arduo trabajo por hacer realidad esta conferencia. A los intérpretes, equipo técnico y a todo el personal de apoyo que hacen posible la participación inclusiva y efectiva de las personas con discapacidad en esta, su conferencia, muchísimas gracias por su labor. Esperamos que la conferencia continúe fortaleciendo sus procesos, ganando mayor visibilidad y generando las condiciones necesarias para una participación cada vez mayor y más accesible para todos. Gracias a todos por su participación, dedicación y valiosas contribuciones. Y a mis colegas del Buró, una vez más, ha sido un honor servir junto a ustedes. Gracias.
Thank you, Marilyn. I kindly invite Mr. Sigaswara Gunaratna, Vice President of the Conference from Sri Lanka, to make his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, over the last 3 days, we have deliberated upon the latest developments in the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities at this current juncture and in the lead up to the Summit of the Future. There is no doubt that much progress has been made since the advent of the Convention, which today has 191 parties, which in essence means that it is almost universal. The large interest in the deliberations, even at heads of state and ministerial levels, is an indicator of the priority that governments have come to perceive the rights of persons with disabilities. The participation of a large number of stakeholders is a further indicator of the global interest generated. There is no doubt that it is a work in progress, but I think all of us can to a certain extent be satisfied that there is forward momentum. A comparative indicator, if one goes back in history, would be the time when the Millennium Development Goals were adopted. Within those 8 goals, 21 targets and 60 indicators, disabilities were mentioned only once, and that too with respect to women giving birth in unhygienic conditions and becoming disabled afterwards. Thereafter, the discourse on disabilities was given the necessary framework and voice with the adoption of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Our annual deliberations have ensured that the rights of persons with disabilities are reflected in the global discourse taking place in multiple forums. Therefore, it is incumbent on every one of us to take the key messages that have emanated from these sessions back to our capitals, back to our countries, where tangible actions bridging the public policy discourse and practical innovative solutions can make that real difference in changing perceptions to accept that disability does not mean inability. As the late sporting legend Muhammad Ali once said, it is the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. And once that belief becomes a conviction, things begin to happen. As a Vice Chair of the Bureau, it has been a great privilege during the last 2 years to work under the chairmanship of His Excellency Tariq Ladeb of Tunisia, and alongside my fellow colleagues from Greece, Georgia, and Panama to organize this session. It was also my added pleasure to have co-chaired the roundtable at this session on international cooperation to promote technology innovations and transfer for an inclusive future. I also wish to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat for being the backbone in organizing this conference and providing the Bureau with the necessary support to make informed decisions on behalf of all of us. It was Seneca the Younger who said that the greater part of progress is the desire to make progress. Let us move forward with the resolve to make that tangible difference in our respective societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Sugeswara, for your remarks. And before I deliver my closing remarks, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Marwa Jabbu, who is with us in the Bureau representing Africa.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So in few words, I would like to thank all my colleagues of the Bureau. It was such an exceptional experience, and I enjoyed working with you for months. I thank the Secretariat for their availability and their support, my regional group, Africa, for their great collaboration. Since I came to New York, the CRPD has been the best and the most inspiring event for me. I've never seen as much as many, this number of people who are talented and skilled and inspiring in the same place. And they kept telling me and teaching me with every speech and every show and every side event that there is nothing impossible in this life, and when there is a will, there is a way. So people with disability used to say, nothing for us without us, and here I quote with my PR, nothing for all of us without you. So please keep up the good work and keep inspiring us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marwa. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, at the conclusion of this year's COSP, once again, we see that the conference comprises the most important international event on disability and rightly attracts delegates, experts, stakeholders, and communities of persons with disabilities from across the globe. Let this 17th session serve as a reminder of the fundamental importance of the CRPD and the need to continue advancing the rights of persons with disabilities. Yet again, another milestone was reached during this year's session when, for the first time on the international stage, the topic of technological innovation and technological transfer was debated from the disability rights perspective. Indeed, the sub-theme of this year's COSP and the focus of the discussion of Roundtable 1 was international cooperation to promote technology and innovations and transfer for an inclusive future, which sought to identify strategies to reinforce global cooperation for ensuring that technology development and transfer mechanisms are inclusive, ethical, and accessible. At this current historical juncture, characterized by the inexorable climate crisis, the proliferation of armed conflicts, and the emergence of health pandemics of increasing severity and complexity, more and more of the world's population find themselves in situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies. As highlighted by the sub-theme and discussion of Roundtable 2, persons with disabilities are disproportionately affected in such situations, and protecting their rights under the CRPD is fundamental for ensuring accountability and for developing effective policies and measures to combat the rising threats of conflict, climate change, and health emergencies. The 17th session of the COSP also tackled the issue of continuing relevance and importance through the sub-theme promoting the rights of persons with disabilities to decent work and sustainable livelihoods. The discussion in Roundtable 3 engaged a diverse range of experts from both the UN system and organizations representing persons with disabilities to unpack the gaps and challenges in achieving this fundamental right. The conference has therefore once again set an example for future sessions to continue tackling the most pressing issues with the goal of bolstering our collective efforts both in ambition and scope to achieve the rights and freedoms of persons with disabilities guaranteed in the CRPD in all aspects of life, particularly at the critical juncture fraught with multiple intersecting challenges threatening the hard-won progress we have achieved thus far. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank each of the vice presidents of the conference, Georgia, Greece, Panama, and Sri Lanka, for your active and valuable participation and cooperation in the preparation of the conference, as well as your role in co-chairing and coordinating the various meetings of this conference. On behalf of the Bureau, I would like to extend a warm and sincere thank you to all colleagues at the Secretariat and their partners across the and beyond the UN system who provided sign language interpretation, closed caption, and easy to understand documentation, and many more who provided services and supports. Collectively, you helped make this conference a success. The Bureau would like to acknowledge with appreciation the long experience and commitment of the Secretariat to advancing the rights of persons with disabilities, which has been indispensable to the Bureau over the past 2 years. Last but not least, as President of the Conference and on behalf of the Bureau, I would like to extend our sincere thanks and gratitude to organizations of persons with disabilities and members of civil society who have traveled to New York to actively engage with and participate in COSP. Without your energy, enthusiasm, and tireless commitment, this conference would not be the same. I thank you. Finally, it has been an honor for Tunisia to serve as President of the Conference of States Parties for another year at its 17th session and to have led the Bureau over the past 2 years. I was just informed by the Secretariat that Sri Lanka has been nominated by APJ for the incoming presidency, elect together with Canada, Poland, and 2 other nominations whose names are to be confirmed by African Group and the GRULAC, and they will carry on to lead the work in incoming Bureau for the next session in 2025. We look forward to working with and meeting many of you next year again at the COSP17. We wish the next Bureau a successful run and the best of luck. With this, I declare the meeting closed. I thank you.